All right, gentlemen, we are live on Facebook. Hello, everybody. My name is Ben Fairfield. I'm the managing director of success coaching at Success Magazine, and I'm excited to bring to you yet another installment of the expert interview series today. My friend Don Hobbs, president of Success Enterprises, and I get the opportunity to spend some time with Dr. Michael Abelson, the godfather of the disc. Michael, thanks for being on with us today.
It's a pleasure, Ben. Thanks for the invitation. I'm looking forward to it.
And Don's looking sharp as always.
Thank you. Is that the title you want, Michael, the Godfather? I noticed that
nobody's ever called me the Godfather of disc before. So Ben, I greatly appreciate that. As you know, we have a very nice following, and we have people all over the country and Canada and other parts of the world. But nobody's ever called me the Godfather. So thanks.
Hey, well, it's the truth. It's the truth. Now you and Don and I have crossed paths multiple times in past lives at different companies. So we know who you are. I would love for you to do your 60 to 90 second elevator pitch on who is Dr. A. If no one's met you before, doesn't know who you are, who are you?
Well, it's kind of interesting because I have a very different type of background. I started in the psychology area because I actually have a master's in clinical psych. I ran a crisis center for 2 years in central Michigan. I worked at a state mental hospital for a year. And as I shared with you before, I think I got out in time. And then I worked at an adult mental health clinic for a year, and then went back and got my MBA and PhD in business management. And was on the faculty at Texas A&M University for a little over 30 years, taught small classes for the last 20 years of 400 to 475 students per class. So I probably taught over 50,000 undergraduates. I'm very proud of my time at Texas A&M, wonderful, great institution. I retired from there in 2011 emeritus. And been working with the Abelson group. We founded in 1986. We got involved with the disc in around 2000, and here we are in 2021.
Yeah. By the way, that is where the term Dr. A comes from, because of course you really are a doctor, and we've known you that way for a long time. Michael, if you don't mind, while we're doing kind of introductions, why don't you give a high level view on disc? What's the idea behind disc?
Well, the idea actually goes back to over 400 BC, so many years ago. And most of these behavioral profiles, one of the things to keep in mind is the disc is a behavioral profile. If anybody tells you it's a personality profile, they really don't know what they're talking about, because disc just measures your behaviors, and that's just one component of our personality. All right, so you need to keep that in mind, and we look at 5 different aspects of some personality. Again, the disc is one, but there are over 30 discs out there. They all come from a guy by the name of Marston, who also created Wonder Woman. In fact, his family is the proudest, not of disc, okay, which has tens of millions of people have taken the assessment, right, from one company or another. We've had over 500,000 people that have taken our disc with us, but they're the proudest of Marston's creation of Wonder Woman. But anyhow, in the 1920s, he took this ancient philosophy of 4 different styles and created and wrote this book. And then what happened in the 50s and 60s, there's a lot of different organizations and people that took this concept, okay, and they created all different types of discs of behavioral profiles. And they're all different qualities. The one we use, I did not create, so I can use any of them out there. And every couple of years, I go back and I look at the industry to make sure that the one we're using, I believe, is the best, and that's why we're using this one. And I've never changed. I've used this particular disc for over 20 years now. We're one of the top distributors in the world, with this company, and proud of that. So it's important when you look at the disc that you make sure it is a high quality disc. There are a couple others out there that are high quality, but most of them are not very good at all.
So Michael, what to that light, because we have talked about this before, what makes a disc high quality versus a disc assessment? And we're going to dive deeper into discs. So if you're not quite sure what this means yet, hang in there with us because we're going to get there. This is powerful stuff. Yet for somebody that does know, how do you differentiate between a valid or a good assessment, or like some of the ones you're talking about that may not be as powerful?
Well, the easiest way, it's not the most accurate, but the easiest way is doing something called face validity. All right. So what all that means is you have somebody read the report and they tell you how accurate they think it is of them. Right. So that's a little tainted because not everybody's totally truthful and we all have blind spots and things of that nature. Okay. But that's probably the easiest way to determine. And every time we give somebody an assessment, a DISC assessment, and we're going to use it for whatever purpose, whether it's for hiring, for team building, personal development, whatever, what we do is we have them read either the general characteristics part or the sales characteristics part, which is the very first section of the report itself, because there's different versions. And we ask them to give us a % accuracy, okay, as far as they're concerned. And when I do this, and I've done several studies where we've looked at 300, 500, and as many as 1,000 people, okay, to look at their face validity, all right? This particular disc is just truly astounding. We have about 75% of the people tell us it's 95% accurate or greater, which is really incredible for a psychological assessment. About 90% of the people tell us it's 90% accurate or greater. All right, so that's pretty good. So the test for anybody who's taking any type of disc is to look at it and to be honest with yourself. Or it's interesting, when we ask people to share their disc with somebody else and do the same thing, they always say it's more accurate than the person says it for themselves. All right, but look at the disc and see how accurate it is. So that's one of the indicators. Another indicator for the disc that we have, to the best of my knowledge, this disc is the only disc that complies and has demonstrated evidence that it doesn't discriminate when it's used for hiring, which is really important because a lot of discs and behavioral profiles are used for hiring.
Right.
Well, if you're using it for hiring, you better make sure it doesn't discriminate on age, okay, or on gender, or on cultural background, or on the different characteristics or classifications that the federal government, has to make sure that it's not discriminatory in your decision making, for using it. The other thing to keep in mind is you never use any assessment, whether it's a DISC or any other assessment, for 100% of your criteria. And a lot of organizations do this. They call it screening. And if you don't meet the screening, then you don't get to the next step. Well, if your organization is doing that, what you're really doing is you're using it for 100% of the entry, okay, into the hiring process, right? Well, there's no assessment that's 100% accurate. So we always recommend to all of our clients not to use the DISC or any behavioral profile or any set of behavioral profiles for more than a third of the decision. The other third should be what you know about the person from their history, their education, their past work experience, letters of recommendation, those types of things. And the final third should be what you learn in the interview process itself. All right, no matter how many people you're having them interview or how you use the assessment. One of the great things about our assessment, it's so accurate that it's great to use it as part of the interview process, where you just ask them a question that's in the report that they say is already true about them, and you ask them to go into it at greater depth. And before you know it, they've really told you all kinds of neat stuff about themselves that you would never get if you just asked them that question point blank without having the assessment in front of you, right? Because people get defensive. But so anyhow, those are just a couple things to keep in mind. The third thing I want to share with you is most discs have two graphs. They have a natural or adaptive, all right, where they look at two different aspects of our behaviors, all right? There is a company that has a 3-graph model. I strongly recommend to never use a 3-graph model, and there's reasons for that. We probably won't have time to get into that today, but please use a disc. If you're not going to use ours, use a disc that only has a 2-graph model and not the 3-graph model.
And and let's cover those real quickly. Let's talk about the two styles.
Okay, there are basically two styles that all discs look at. Okay, one of them is what you're like naturally. What you're like when you're by yourself with someone who you highly trust and you can be yourself, or when you're under stress, right? And the reason that under stress is because you don't have the energy to keep any type of mask up, right? The other type of behavior that's measured is the adaptive. And that's how we adapt at work, or depending on how you take the assessment. We have religious organizations that take the assessment, so, or have their people take the assessment. So when they take the assessment, right, it's under, that religious area. We have a lot of volunteer organizations that have people take it, so they should take it under what they're like in a volunteer organization. So what happens in that case is it's the mask that they put on or the way they are in that environment, because people might be different when they're at home versus at work. Okay.
Well, and to that point,
Michael,
I want to jump in there because you made me think of a couple things. First, you talked about when you give the assessment to somebody else that person knows, they come back saying it's more accurate. So I've used the DISC in the hiring process. And I think that's also a point I want to touch on, because a lot of people make the mistake, like you said, of making a hiring or firing decision or hiring or not hiring decision based solely on the results of the DISC assessment, which is a huge mistake.
Totally.
But I loved what you said about giving it to somebody. So when I would hire people, I would give them the DISC assessment. And again, it's part of what I've been taught to be like the blink, right? It's a one part of this bigger process. And if it doesn't line up with what you're seeing or feeling, then again, we have places we can go with that, and we can uncover and have conversations. It's a tool. It's not intelligent inherently. It is a tool for us to use to be able to decipher and learn more what we're seeing. But I used to give it to their significant others, and I would give them an assessment, and I'd say, hey, I want you to take this home to your significant other, whoever that is. And if you don't have a significant other, take it to a friend, parent, whoever, but take it to somebody that knows you. And I want them to validate it just like I just did with you. I want them to look over this. And it was amazing, the light bulb that would come on in that second interview when they would come back, because all of a sudden, even the stuff they were pushing back on maybe a little bit, that they said, oh, I don't know if that part's really that accurate. They take it to the other person. The other person's like, are you kidding me? That part's 100% accurate. Like, you're really that way. Like, absolutely, you're that way. Right? Like Les Brown says, it's hard to see the picture when you're in the frame. Like we all have a version of ourselves that we see. And I love assessments like the DISC specifically, because it helps us to really understand not only another person and how best to communicate and work with that person, but from a personal standpoint, understand ourselves at a higher level. So if you would, now you've had a lot of experience in teaching people to use the DISC and teaching people how to use it in a hiring capacity. And then I'll stop talking here in a second, let Dawn have a question. But I want to pick your brain for just a second on, what do you see? We already hit one of the mistakes of using the DISC to be the yes or no in that process of making a decision on hiring. Are there any other typical pitfalls that you've seen over the course of doing? How many DISCs have you done?
Over 500,000.
So over 500,000, I'd say that's a pretty accurate subset. So over all of that, have you seen any generic pitfalls or some common things that show up that people use it incorrectly or do improperly in the process that could be skewing their results?
Sure, and it's interesting when something is written in the report. I use the report as a structured interview, and I want to make sure that the person is willing to accept the information that's in the report. I'm not there to say, no, you're wrong. This report is more accurate about yourself than you are. I mean, that is a really inappropriate way to use the report. It's more like a structured interview to really get them to talk about something. And once you've gotten it validated and they tell you it's 90 or 95, or a lot of cases, people tell us, that little part that we have them read is 100% accurate. All right, then you can pick and choose anywhere that you want to from the report, and then you can get more into that particular item, right? And what happens sometimes, a lot of times what happens is people who are selling you a DISC are salespeople. They're not psychologists. They're not social workers. They're not trained in the psychology of people, okay? All right, so what happens is they put too much credence into the report. I've seen people, especially use other reports, where the person is telling them, no, it's not accurate. And they say, well, it probably is accurate. You just don't want to admit it. That's a no-no. Okay, you don't want to go down that road, right? Now, that a lot of people call that a blind spot, right? And sometimes the report is wrong. And the person who's using it has to realize that sometimes the report isn't accurate. I mean, our DISC alone, if you just use the DISC, it's 23 to 25 pages. Around 80 to 85% of it is actually about that individual, where most other reports, around 50% or at least 25% is just boilerplate. It's the same, okay, for everybody. It just tells you what you have in the report. So it's important to realize that that you need to go with the person and where the person is willing to go. Now, if you're a coach, one of the things you're going to find out by using good assessments is as you establish that relationship with somebody, they're going to be willing to go at deeper and deeper places, but you don't want to do a deep dive with them until they're ready. Because when you do that, what that does is that turns them off, okay, and they feel as if they're overexposing themselves and they feel uncomfortable, and it gets in the way of the coaching relationship. It gets in the way of the relationship. So it's important to just look at those things of the report that the person is willing to accept at the time, and to go from there. And the biggest error that some people make is they want to show how smart they are as the coach, or as the salesperson, or as the quote unquote quasi psychologist. All right, and so they then get in a little fight with the person who's doing the disc. No need to do that. You'll have plenty of time, if you're good at what you do, to get into the nitty gritty. If you wind up hiring them, you can look at that when it comes to your quarterly or half year evaluation, or whatever you do evaluation.
Hey, so Michael, I'm thinking about what you just kind of led into, and my question was really about. We talked about the hiring process and using this disc in that situation, which, by the way, I've done dozens and dozens and dozens of times, right? Probably more than that, hundreds of times, and through the years. And then you just kind of jumped into this coaching arena. What else? Like, where are the common uses for disc? What can we look to disc for? Where's disc going to be utilized and useful to us?
Well, it's a phenomenal tool for coaching. I mean, you can actually use that one report for 6, 8, 10 sessions. It's so rich, and it depends on what you want to do. For example, one of the things that we've talked about when we're working together on the coaching program together is we have an onboarding report. And what we do is we take the disc of the coach and the disc of the client, and we put it together. And it's a phenomenal way to start out the relationship, because what happens, for example, one of the pages, it says how to communicate. Let's say, Don, you're my coach. Okay, so you would be first on the page, or we could turn it around. Since I'm the client, I could be first on the page. Okay, and it says how to communicate with Don. And then there's there's 8 to 10 or 12 different bullet items on how to communicate with you. And then on the same page, there's how to communicate with me. All right. And then you have a conversation. Hey, we're going to be working in a coaching relationship. Let's get on the right foot. So let's talk about how my blind spots or your blind spots as the coach. Okay. And then what I have them do is I have them circle all the items that they agree are accurate. And they might not circle all the items. That's fine. We're just going to use the ones that they circle. Okay. And then I have them put an asterisk or something in front of 2 or 3 or 4 that are the most important for them. All right. And then what's even more fun is the next page is how not to communicate with each other, which I think a lot of times is more important, because if you say the one wrong thing, you can turn somebody off and they'll never come back to talk with you, even though they're sitting right in front of you. Okay. So there's like a dozen, and depends on how many different components of our assessments that we use, because as you guys know, we have the behavioral profile. We look at what motivates the behavior, because you're going to have people that have very, very similar disc profiles, but they're very different people. Why? It's because there's something else going on with the personality. All right. So we look at emotional intelligence. We look at leadership styles. We look at what stresses people out. And these are all different aspects of somebody's personality. So it's important to realize as a coach that the disc is going to help you, no matter which one it is only going to help you with how somebody behaves. It isn't going to show you what's underneath or what's really driving those behaviors, unless that's part of what you're doing. But anyhow, what you want to do is you want to use it again as a structured interview, whichever disc that you're using. And then you can just go on and on and on, with that. And because we have a team disc, and I can see us when we're doing the coaching stuff, is a lot of these people have teams. Right? Wouldn't you, as a team leader, or even as somebody on the team, wouldn't it be helpful to know, where everybody else is? Okay. And we're going to be doing that. So there's all kinds of coaching opportunities for that. And if you don't have a team, you just have an administrative assistant. I mean, treat them as you are the coach and they are the client, and, do the onboarding report. And then what happens is you have a better relationship there. You know what their strengths and weaknesses are. More importantly, your subordinate knows what your strengths and weaknesses and blind spots are, so they know how to communicate with you. It's just awesome when it's used appropriately.
That's so powerful. And you just talked about that team assessment and the power of of the team getting to know each other, right? Because so we can be good dance partners. We know when to zig when the other person's zagging and all that kind of thing. It's important. I just got somebody that texted me that's watching us live. You know who you are. They asked this, and I'm curious. So I'm going to ask you, Dr. A. So essentially what they're saying is they understand the DISC is a very powerful report. They understand that there's other very powerful reports as well, and that not all of them should be utilized for the same thing. How does the DISC stack up or work with some of the other major assessments like Strength Finders, the one that they just text asking the question about when you talked about teams?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, more and more of our clients are talking about strength finders, from Gallup. All right, and I'm hoping that the Gallup, people are asking, the Gallup clients are asking the Gallup people about DISC. Right now, that they are different. Okay, I mean the strength finders. What my suggestion is, I never talk down about some other assessment tool. All right. What I do is I talk up about the DISC and the value that it brings. And more and more people are using both. It's interesting. You can't go wrong by conferring with 2 or 3 different aspects of the same thing, i.e. behaviors. And because where you see an overlap, you're more confident that that's true. And if you're going to dual tools. So if you're using Gallup Strength Finders and you want to use our DISC, that's terrific because you're going to get 2 different perspectives of how people behave. Now, keep in mind that Strength Finders looks at strengths and weaknesses, right? Our DISC looks at a lot more than just strengths and weaknesses, all right? So it's a broader approach, okay, than just Strength Finders. Don't get me wrong. The Gallup is a fantastic organization and Strength Finders is a terrific tool, all right? But every tool has its limitations, just like our DISC has limitations, the Strength Finders has limitations. So for the person who texted in, my suggestion is the DISC is very cost effective, especially for the mistakes that you can make by making some decisions. I mean, how much does it cost you to hire the wrong person? Yeah. Right. We have a calculator that demonstrates that it's going to cost anywhere from 25% to 200% of the first year's compensation, and compensation includes fringe benefits. Right. So if you've got a $50,000 a year job, right, and you've got maybe 25% fringe benefits, right, so you're talking $60,000 to $65,000 in costs. Right, 25% of that is what, $15,000.
That's
right?
a big deal.
And that's
at a minimum. That's the low side.
We're talking about a couple $100,000 possibly, depending on who it is. If it's a vice president, or if it's a salesperson. Salespersons can really mess up, your reputation. I mean, you may spend 10 years building reputation. You could have a salesperson out there, and in 10 seconds or 10 minutes, they can tarnish it. Right. So it's important. So go the mile, get another assessment. Always check out its accuracy. If it's accurate, use it. If it's not accurate, don't use it. And that's why, truthfully, I like with our clients to not just use our DISC behavior profile. I like them to use our driving forces or our motives, because I want to know what's driving that behavior. Right. We can have 2 people that are very, very similar. Let's say they're D or DIs, okay? And they're DIs. They like to interact with people. They can be decisive. They can be very loyal. It's a combination of the D and the I. But you have 2 people that are very different. Our DISC actually looks at 384 different behavioral styles. The next closest one in accuracy only looks at 24. Okay, so we're saying that there's only 384 different people in the world. You got to be kidding me. Okay, everybody is different. So it's important that you look at different dimensions. And that's one of the things that our DISC brings and our motives brings and our leadership characteristics brings, because we're now looking at different types of characteristics in the individual, and you're getting a much different and broader and more accurate picture than just using one assessment. So that's a long answer to a short question. Strength Finders is a great tool. I use it, but also, use a DISC because they do look at different things.
Absolutely. So one quick thing here. So you brought up something I want to touch on, because Don and I have had this conversation multiple times, and I'm sure people watching have as well. You said it almost indirectly, and I think it's worth pointing out. It talks about, you were talking about the tangible expense of a bad hire, right? The hard costs of a bad hire. but where you were going with that, and we probably didn't have enough time to flesh it out completely, but the intangible expense to reputation and long-term damage and client loss and that sort of,
Totally.
that's way more than the tangible upfront, oh, I have to pay a third of the salary because I made a bad choice, right? So for all those people who are thinking, I don't have time or I don't want to spend the money, it's foolishness. It's absolute foolishness not to take the time, invest the money on the front end, because you're not just protecting the hard costs, you're protecting all of the intangible expenses as well. And I think that's, as a coach or a leader, that's really, really important to keep into consideration when you're thinking about the hiring process and working something like the DISC into it.
That's a great point. Just look at the amount of time that is spent with the hire.
Totally.
Okay. And how costly that is. You know, people say, well, I was in a committee. Okay. And we spent an hour, but it was a waste of time. Well, if you had 10 people in the committee and each person makes, you know, $1,000 or $100 an hour. Okay. You know, that's $1,000 you've just wasted. Okay. That's a lot of money. Just imagine the multiples, you know, as far as how much money you could be losing. You know, and people will sometimes use a less expensive disc because it hardly costs anything. All right. Well, that is such foolishness. Just the amount of time that they spend on reading the report is worth the difference in the price. I mean, our disc, just the disc alone, is much less than $100 for, you know, per assessment. You know, so and we will save you tens of thousands, and if you're using it for multiple positions or multiple hires in the same position, we'll save you thousands. We've got clients, we've saved them millions of dollars, okay, through not making bad decisions. Especially in the hiring. Now, there's another aspect to this too, and I'm sure this is going to come out in the coaching. It's not just hiring first time out. It's reassigning people within an organization. It's moving advancement. It's moving them up in an organization. And you think you know what somebody's like? A lot of organizations make this mistake where they take somebody who's a great technician, whatever the technical area is, and all of a sudden they make them a manager, and they think because they're a great technician, they're not going to be a great manager. Oh my God. You know, it's kind of like, it's a double whammy. You've taken somebody who's going to perform really well for you at the technical level that you really need, and then you put them in a managerial level where they don't have much experience. They might have the great common sense, but it's going to take them a while to figure out how to be a manager, right? You know,
so often, Michael.
I know it's really incredible.
Crazy.
So one of the things that we help our clients is we help them, you know, once they're in there, we actually have a way to determine what are the correct characteristics. We call it a benchmark, okay, that they should be hiring for, whether it's somebody new or an advancement within the organization. Okay, and we can look at the DISC, we can look at the motives, and then we can also look at the leadership characteristics, you know, and those benchmarks are invaluable.
Yeah.
You know, because let's say you're in a sales organization, you know, and let's say you have 50 people that are in the same position. What you have to do is get one benchmark, right? And then that one benchmark is because that job is probably similar. You know, it might be different if it's regional, it might be different, you know, for different reasons, but the core is going to be basically the same. And then you have assessments, and you can tell what's going on. We had a client a number of years ago. We don't have them now because they were bought out by somebody else, and they didn't want to listen to me because the acquiring company had their company. But anyhow, it's kind of interesting. And we redid this a couple of times with them to test it out. But we got to the point where we could predict at 100% accuracy wrong hires.
Wow.
Okay. All right. And we went back and we found out, you know, because some people will hire. They got to the point where if you're using a profile that doesn't suggest they're going to be successful, that's okay. But we want you to write, you know, a page or something as to why you think that the information that you have trumps the assessment. Okay, fine. All right. But then we went back to the organization to find out how successful they were. And to a one, they were not successful. Right. And we had around an 80% hit rate for those people who were successful. So if we can do that with a tool, and I'm not telling you we can do that with any organization. I'm giving you an organization where we were 100%, which rarely happens. Right. But if we can do that, just 80% accuracy, you know, it could be worth millions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that's such a great story because, you know, again, we think about how many mistakes people are making every single day in their businesses that they don't need to make. I've thought of, probably when you said it, I thought of 150 to 200 examples of top salesperson being moved up to manager, screwed up being no longer the top salesperson and a lousy manager.
Yeah.
And everybody else in the sales staff hates them because they were just promoted from the ranks of them and they're a lousy manager and everybody loses, right? It's just a complete washout from one mistake.
Right.
And so I think
and they could have been very close friends with all these salespeople before they became a manager. And now you've put them in a really awkward situation because they were friends with somebody or somebodies or all kinds of people. And all of a sudden they're their boss, where it's good to be friendly, but you can't be a friend. All right. And that's what I do when I explain leadership and management, because you need to be friendly. You need to have that friendliness aspect, but you're no longer their friend because you've got to make some hard decisions and they might not like you because of those decisions. But that's what effective leadership and a good manager is all about. You know, they're going to make decisions and they might make those decisions that other people don't think are right, but that's why they're getting paid the quote unquote big bucks, because they're doing that. But it puts them in a really awkward situation.
Yeah.
So Ben, I'm thinking about this. That probably means, I think what Dr. A is saying is, I don't think that this really feels right to me, or I think she's going to be great. I don't think that that's.
That's one of those mistakes. I should have brought that up, but when you asked me, you know, people hire.
I've got a good feeling about this.
They really.
I've got a good feeling about it.
Right. They really like, you know, oh man, there's such great chemistry.
Yeah.
You know, we got to hire this person. Right. And then they hire them. And 6 months later, it's such terrible chemistry. OK, because it was a lousy wrong hire because they didn't need somebody who was just like them. They didn't need a mini me. All right. What they needed was somebody else, you know, and bring them into the organization, because that's what is important. I mean, they're your best teams. We actually have a wheel and we can plot people because our wheel is a geometrically proportioned wheel, which means that we'll put people's, you know, symbols, usually their initials, as to where they are on the wheel. And what you want is you want people all over the wheel in different areas, because they bring different strengths and they have limitations. And one of the other things that I do when I work with managers is I stress. We have this program that I call individual discovery, and we give them all 5 of our primary assessments. But what I do with them is I let them know, hey, focus on your strengths and delegate to others those areas that you have weaknesses or limitations. Right? That's what a good team does. And then use the disc so you understand how to communicate with everybody, because they have different communication styles.
Well, and Michael, you're hitting it right on the head, and I want to make this super practical for those watching. So this was probably 3.5 years ago. True story. All the players are good friends of mine. I love them all dearly, but there was a team in sales that was very high performing, at the top of their class in their company. And they owner and sales manager butted heads, right? And so ultimately that relationship went south because they were such different people. They butted heads and they parted ways. Now, Rainmaker, or the team owner, comes in and hires a person to replace that sales director. And from the beginning, I'm thinking, oh my goodness, this is doomed. Not because either one's bad. They're both incredible people, and they're both exactly the same people.
The same.
And so this team owner made the mistake of going and hiring himself. Well, he didn't see that, right? So again, as you can expect, time marches on. The results don't show up for any participant that they were hoping for. And they're left there scratching their head after. And that was my conversation with this team owner when they were asking me, what do you think? What's going on here? I can't figure this out. I said, the problem is you hire yourself. And you're amazing, and so is that person, but your organization doesn't need another you. Your organization needs the counterbalance of you, because you're really good at what you're good at, and you leave a trail of disaster behind you in what you're not, right? So we utilize the disc and a few other tools like that to help them find somebody that wasn't just like them. We hired for the behavior we were looking for versus the heartstrings and the guy I want to go hang out with, or the gal I want to go hang out with and enjoy being friends with. Like, you can be friends and not have to employ people. Find the person your business needs by behavior, and you're going to take it to a whole new level. So I appreciate the fact that you said that, because I've lived it multiple times with clients.
Oh, it happens in every organization. If you really like them, ask them out for a drink. You don't have to hire them. Type of thing. So you want to hire people that give you the appropriate balance. And again, I want to stress, just don't look at behaviors. you need to look at what's driving those behaviors or what's underneath the behaviors. And it's a little harder to see that than it is just to see the behaviors, because you can have two people who are C's. Okay, they're very detail oriented. You know, they like to really, you know, understand something and have knowledge base. All right, but one of them could be selfless and give things away. All right, and give their time away, and the other one could be very utilitarian. All right, and looks at things very, very efficiently and gives very little of their time away, right? But they're both intense C's, all right? But they come across as being totally different. One is going to give you the shirt off their back. The other one's going to charge you, if you give them 10 or 15 minutes of their time, type of thing.
Yeah.
So you need to look at more than just one dimension of an individual. And the DISC is an excellent tool. It's a great tool, but it's not the only tool. And that goes back to the question regarding the strength finders or some other tools. There's other excellent tools out there, and that's fine. But if you're going to use a behavior profile, again, please contact us. And use a good tool. And then test out the tool that you're using. If people are telling you that it's only 80 or 85% accurate, you can get a lot more accurate tool than that. And you're going to be making a lot of bad decisions because it's not a really accurate tool.
Yeah, that's huge. No, I have 3 people that have texted me so far. When I'm looking down, it's because I'm getting more texts with questions to ask you than I ever have for anybody that I've done this with. So my apologies. I'm not playing Candy Crush on my phone. I'm literally fielding all these texts. But I think I'm going to ask you those questions. We'll get into those. We'd be remiss, though, if you didn't give just a high-level overview, like a couple of minutes on the 4 different behavior types, right? And
Right.
kind of just some examples of what those are. Assuming somebody watching this isn't familiar with what those are, let's take a couple minutes and go there before we ask the questions of the audience.
All right. Well, what I like to do is I like to use imagery of people. Okay. So let's use Meryl Streep in The Devil Wears Prada. All right. Where she's this very, very, charging, go-getting, person who is just, people fear, right? Now that's an off-the-chart D, all right? Makes decisions, all right? They're very, very competitive, all right? They can have these blind spots because they don't even realize how fearful people are of them. Right now, I'm presenting a negative type of D, right? There's all kinds of positive types of D too, that are very, very giving, but they're typically very competitive. They're very outward. They're very task oriented. They want to get things done, right? They don't mind if you, I refer to it as like hit them in between the head with a rifle. They might flinch a little bit, but be very upfront with them. Okay, don't walk into the office and say, "How was your weekend?" They're going to look at you and say, "Why do you care?" Or they'll keep that to themselves and say, "Why do you care? Why are you here? That's more important to me," right? So that's a stereotypical, very, very intense high D. Right, let's go to the I. I like to use Oprah Winfrey, okay? An incredible interviewer, right? Because she is very good and adept at hearing people and getting them to talk. And she likes to talk. So they're very loyal. They're very outward. They're people oriented, but they look outside themselves, right? So they ask wonderful questions. They show you that they have a concern for you. They have this loyalty for people. Okay, all right, let's look at an S, which deals with steadiness. All right, and I like to use Mr. Rogers. I don't know how many people remember Mr. Rogers, and his neighborhood. All right, the Dalai Lama, could be. I mean, anybody who is very family oriented. All right, and what happens is they typically keep to themselves regarding how they're feeling, but they're great with asking you delving questions regarding how you're feeling, and they show a sincere concern. They don't like conflict. Right? They run from conflict, but the D, which is opposite, loves conflict, right? So we have this notion of a very people-oriented person, but they're more internally oriented. So they come more from the heart and from the gut. And then we have the C, who is very task-oriented, who is very internally oriented. So they come more from the head or cognitions, right? And what happens is they're very detail-oriented. They're very quality-oriented. They have a hard time making decisions. If you want to work if you're working with a C, don't ask them to make a decision. Ask them to give you 2 or 3 or 4 options, and they can make a recommendation, right? But they're fearful of being wrong. And that's one of the things that stops them from making those decisions. So don't put them in a situation where they have to make those types of decisions. And then these are just the pure types. And if you really want to look at it, from the general population, we're talking at maybe 5-7% at the very most that are all four pure types together. Okay, it's closer to like 5 or 4% of the population. So most people are a combination or a mix of all of these different types of behaviors. And again, remember, this is just behaviors. There's a lot more to us than just behaviors.
And by the way, Michael, yeah, it's good. It's really good. Thinking about, what you've done and 500,000, assessments in, and, the experience you've had. I mean, I'm assuming there's also that, not only does the disc work, but learning about the disc works, because you can pinpoint, a lot about the people that you're dealing with, right? That if you're in a relationship with a client, you're not going to say, Ben came out of the real estate business. They're going to say, hey, Mr. Seller, would you take this disc profile? He's going to know how this person is. He's going to see the wife is a C and the husband's a D, or vice versa. And he's going to know where to play and what to do and all that stuff. So talk a little bit about that, because I think that's one of the things, we've talked about the purity of the profile or the assessment itself. But the knowledge is incredible, because this is what's going to help you get through life and get really more from the experiences you have, right?
Absolutely. And I was talking to an attorney client yesterday, and she was sharing with me how she was trying to get this message across to this individual. And as she's describing the individual, what we had was 2 Ds, okay? And they were kind of clashing, because she thought that she wanted to get this message across. Well, the issue was that the client wasn't interested in the message that she wanted to get across. They were interested in only what they wanted to have an answer to. Okay, so when I expressed to this attorney, I said, you know what, another way to handle this is answer their question right away. Okay, so they feel comfortable and they feel heard, all right? And then what you can do is you can say, well, would you like to hear another dimension of this or something else we should be aware of just in case? And then you can get into the other aspects of the law and the other aspects of where you come as a consultant and what you bring to the relationship, because the client doesn't know. They have a question. They want an answer to that, but they don't know the intricacies of the law, right? And that's where you come in. Same thing with the salesperson. You talk to a D who has a listing. Well, how much are you going to get for my property? Right?
That's all that matters.
It's a little bit more complicated than that. So but that's what they want to know. Okay. So you got to lead with where they are. And and what they want to know. And then after that, you say, well, would you like to look at some other aspects of how we're going to be able to sell your home? Okay, the price is an important aspect, but that's only one aspect. And they're almost always going to say, sure, because at that point, you've established a relationship, you've established a comfort level, because they feel that you can actually hear them. Okay, so getting to your point, Don, one of the great things about the DISC is it really helps you understand how to more effectively communicate with somebody. We actually have a program, and we're putting it on our A-Learn. That's what's our background. This is our Abelson Learning Resource Network, which are videotapes and articles that people can see, and they don't even have to interact with me. But anyhow, we have a program that shows people how to identify what their DIS and C is. In fact, we do it at 8 different levels. So we also talk about a DI and an SC, et cetera, et cetera. So you don't have to give them the assessment. Okay, so you have some foundation and you have some idea of where they might be. And then all you have to do is start catering or communicating to that style. And if it seems like you've clicked, well, then you've accurately assessed what they are. If it seems like you haven't clicked, okay, well, try a related style. Okay, and all of a sudden you're clicking, it's kind of, oh yeah, that's what their style is. Now, what I would recommend is to say to them, look, when I'm working with somebody, I'd really like to better understand you. And so I could understand you better. We have this fantastic tool that we use. Okay, it's called the DISC. I'm going to comp it to you, and I'm going to give you a copy of yourself, but this is going to help me more effectively communicate with you, better understand how to motivate you, understand how to, better work with you. And I know we're talking about using our DISC, in your coaching, and we're going to show the coaches really how to use this tool, okay, to be a better coach. And we're going to do it to the point, because of your background and our background, that we're going to just wow everybody. So I'm really looking forward to that. But part of it's going to be when you're first talking to somebody, to get them to be working with you as a coach. How do you talk to them? Because you haven't had the chance to give them an assessment yet. Okay, so that's also very, very important to be able to understand that, that way to communicate with somebody right off the bat.
Well, and Michael, again, this is why I like the conversational approach to these, because we don't know what we're going to hit on really, but you're just making some amazing points here. And I want to touch on this one. You talked about the click, right? You talked about when you just click with people, and if you're in sales or your service or whatever walk of life you're in, and no matter what you do for a living, building rapport is essential, right? I want you to think back to a time, all those listening, think back to a time where you met somebody for the first time and you left that interaction going, man, I really like that person. Man, I really like that person. They're just, I don't know what it is, but I really like that person. And then think of a different time where you met somebody completely different and you had an opposite reaction after the conversation, right? Oftentimes the people both can be great people. The difference was you built rapport with one and you didn't. You missed the mark with the other, or they with you. And that's one of the biggest ways I've used DISC in coaching hundreds and thousands of people across the country over the years. One of the ways we use it, not just in hiring, but in how do you learn and study behavior? Because the more we understand behavior, the more we study this DISC profile, the faster we can make some quick snap judgments or guesses as to maybe what the behavior of the person we're sitting across the room from or table from or having a quick conversation with. And the better we get at that, the faster we build rapport, and the faster and the deeper we build rapport, all of a sudden we create a massive following. We have more clients than we can handle, and we're making people feel good. So I think that's such an incredible component, that click that you're talking about. Anybody watching, this is one excellent way to build rapport. Now, I'd also be remiss, because you've mentioned it a couple of times, and we can't go into a ton of detail, but we are so excited. And Dawn knows this. I was up till almost 1 o'clock this morning. So that's why this is my third cup of coffee. But we're writing a certification course so people can come to Success Coaching, get the designation of being a Success certified coach, and then take that out to their own practice. And it's going to be world class. I told Dawn last night in a text that just the workbook alone that we're going to provide will be worth the investment they make in the program. So we're committed to world class at that level. What I also know is that we're doing some stuff and working some stuff with Dr. A that none of our competitors out there can do. So you think this is interesting, you think DISC has helped you in the past, you ain't seen nothing yet, reach out to us after this, ben@success.com or don@success.com. And we'd love to share a little bit more about that process if you're interested in being certified. And if you're looking for a coach, we're going to have an army of the best trained coaches in the country. So we are excited about that. More details to come. So Dawn, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm super excited because, one of the things we did in developing this, and I think we shared this with you, Michael, we brought some of the world-class coaches together, and we actually said, hey, let's work on building something that's never been built before. And, what came from that was we believe that this new coaching company, and I say new, I mean, Ben, it's not new to you, it's not new to me, and this is our industry for so many years, but under Success, right? Under this brand, this 124-year iconic brand, this is a newer company. And what we wanted to do was, there's always that place where whatever's the newest has all the capabilities of doing whatever has been done in the past, bringing it forward to the current moment and building the very best that's available now. And I believe that's exactly what we've done. And part of that was getting people like Dr. A involved. And there's other top players that have been engaged and involved in this thing. Ben, and I'm sorry you're up till 1 o'clock in the morning. I knew it would have to happen at some point, but the reality is that, I love the heart that you put into this, the thought behind Glenn Stanford and what we brought to the table in putting Success, all of Success together, but certainly Success Coaching. And I truly believe that, Dr. Abelson is one of those things that's going to make it even more cutting edge, even bigger and better than anything that's ever been done before. So we're very excited about that. And I can't wait for people to get into the certification. We've got coaching clients starting right now. So come on, let's go. Let's do this thing. We got success to build.
Let me add something to it, because a lot of coaching programs have something like the DISC or have the DISC in it. Okay. But typically what they do is they train you on the DISC, but they don't train you really how to use it as a coach. And that is very, very different. Okay, and that's what we're doing in the program. We're going to be training them how to use it, okay, as part of the tools and integrating it into the coaching method, and not just to teach them what a D, I, an S, or a C is, you know, and what these different people are like, because you need to coach differently to the different styles. And it's really important to realize that, and to be involved in a coaching system that shows you how to do that, not just tells you, but shows you how to do that. And that's one of the things that I'm excited about, that we're going to be building into, you know, when we work together on this, on delivering this program.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So we've got 10 minutes left, and I want to hit at least this question, because I think this might create some great conversation, and then you're not getting out of the lightning round, because I'm curious about some of these questions. But here's the first one that was texted me, and I'm just going to read it to you, and then I'll explain and give context if it's not clear. It says, how difficult, and I've heard this from multiple people, how difficult is it to, quote, cheat on the disc? I've had several people that have behaved completely the opposite of their disc profile once they've been hired. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, there's a couple of thoughts on that. Number one, some people can really be knowledgeable of the disc because they've had a lot of training on it, okay? And they think that they can outsmart it. Well, most of the discs you may be able to outsmart, but there's two ways that our assessment catches people who are trying to lie or cheat or deceive the disc, okay? One of them is the process that we teach, okay? Another one is a technical answer, and I'm not going to tell you what that is, okay? But there's a technical way that we have to determine whether someone may not be totally honest, okay, with what they're doing intentionally. Now, a lot of us hide things, you know, unintentionally, but there are some people who try to hide things intentionally, and our assessment will catch that.
Interesting. Okay, so do you believe that it's common that people cheat it, or do you think it's more common that it's people not interpreting the results correctly? What are your thoughts there?
I think what happens is I think people don't like what the assessment says sometimes. So in an interview process will say, no, that's not really me. All right. Now, and I think that's important, you know, to realize that. And that's how they try to cheat also, not just in how they answer the questions. So it's important to be trained in how you actually do the interview. For example, when we debrief somebody, what we do is we have them underline those things in the general characteristics or the sales characteristics part. That's what we use to do this face validity. We ask them to underline those things that they disagree with. And then we go in and we ask them to change that statement to make it totally accurate. And then we delve and talk about, you know, okay, give me an example of how you've changed it. And then we talk about that. And by using that process, you can get a feel for whether they're actually trying to lie to you or not. So for example, there might be a phrase in there, say, this is totally not me. Okay, fine. All right, well, let's change it. How would you change it? And then, okay, now give me an example of how you've changed it. And then they have a hard time coming up with an example. Well, what does that tell you? Okay, you know, so there's different ways and different ways, if you're skilled, to determine whether somebody's lying to you or not. Now, can somebody with my skill probably lie and get away with it? Probably. But I'm not even saying with my, you know, over 20 years working with the disc, you know, with a really good tool like the one we have, that it wouldn't catch me or wouldn't have another person who's skilled in understanding the disc say, well, Michael, you know, I don't know about that. I'm not sure whether this is true or not about you, you know, type of thing.
So I want to touch on that really quick, because I know my past life and a lot of people watching, we utilized, at a former company, utilized the AVA assessment, right? And I know it's not the same thing. I'm not comparing that, but well,
it's not the same thing. It comes from the same model.
Okay. Yes.
You know, but it's same original four thing model.
Yeah. So it's not a replacement, but one question that I was taught years ago by a very intelligent person that you maybe think of when you said that, when they're pushing back on behavior, and I've used this in the disc too, because it's a generic question in sense of which assessment you use it for, but when they're just adamantly opposed to something that you think maybe is true and they just don't want to say that it's true, the best question I was ever taught in that situation was, great, Michael, tell me how you're not that way. And you watch him do this.
The nonverbals are just outstanding, aren't they? Don't they tell us all kinds of neat stuff? And I'll give you another thing to do. If that's true and you're doing your job, and what you do is you're going to talk to some of the references, ask the reference that question, how they deal with it. Okay, because the reference doesn't know why you're asking that question, all right? So they're going to give you more times than not a true answer.
Great little nugget there.
Yeah, that's
awesome.
a great idea. Love that.
Did you write that one down, Don, for us for hiring?
I wish I'd done. Yeah, I wish I'd done that before. That may have been. I may have missed that on a bad hire.
A few times. I'm right there with you.
I've only had one bad hire ever.
Yeah. You hit your quota. All right, got it. All right. So we're down for a lightning round now. We've got 6 minutes left. So Don, you know this style. Feel free to jump in wherever you want. I've got my key ones that I like. First off, I'll give you a softball, an easy one, Dr. A. Same one we ask everybody that's on the show with us. What are you reading right now? What book are you reading right now?
Oh, I have to admit that I don't read books. I don't have the tolerance to sit down and read a book to the end. My mind is just going in too many different directions.
So what's
I like
your
reading
behavior?
Articles, and I like reading newspapers, and I like reading those types of things. But it's really, and truthfully, one of the things that I found a number of years ago, that so many books, unless it's like a novel, it's the same thing that's just marketed a little differently. Okay, it's a very, very similar concept. It was kind of interesting. When I was at Texas A&M, I used to have like 4 or 5 bookcases of books, okay, in my office. And people would come in and think, oh my God, this guy is so smart. Look at all these books that he's read. But none of the students ever asked me if I ever read any of them, So it's just really, sorry, Ben, I'm not reading a book right now.
Hey, that's a fair answer. So I'm guessing, I'm not Dr. A, and by no means am I an expert in the disc, but I'm guessing you're a high D.
Well, I'm a D or a DI. It depends on the environment I'm in. When I'm a speaker, okay, when I'm doing a keynote or I'm doing something in front of hundreds or a couple thousand people, my I comes out. Okay, and we have a blast. We have a great time. But now, I'll get back to that. I won't read a book, but I will go through a book and I'll look at the headlines and I'll look at the I'll look at the table of contents and I'll look at those types of things. And then if it piques my interest, I'll read a little bit in that book. Okay. So I am continually learning, and I am reading books, but I'm not sitting down to read a book from cover to cover. I'm sorry.
That's awesome.
Our first
by the way,
call, I knew it was a high D because our first call, Don and I were like, mucking it up. It's on a Saturday, and Michael's like, "All right, let's get down to it." Go ahead, Don.
I'm a very intense guy, but I can have fun too. So it just depends on what the environment is, right?
Yeah, no, that's classic. A great story, and I can tell that. By the way, that they call that speed reading. And that is speed reading was built for high Ds, no doubt, and it has to do with going through headlines, going through the pieces that give you a sense of what's here, right? That's exactly right. So high D, no doubt. Did you see me doing this? I'm like, Michael, I've known you for a lot of years, right? This is him.
Yeah, more than we probably want to admit, Don. So
I was going to say, is that a we? Did you say we? I'm not.
Excuse me. You would probably want to admit.
All right. I got another one for you, Dr. A. Since this is success coaching, since you're on the Success Coaching Expert Interview Series, how do you personally define success?
I have 2 ways to define success. When I'm helping others, and I can see the nonverbals, and I can see the aha going off in their head. Or I'm very skilled at working with people over the telephone. I ran a crisis center for 2 years. I taught people on how to hear and read in between the lines. When I'm helping somebody else, I view that as being successful. And I'll do things. I've done things many times where I didn't benefit at all, and other people did. I could tell you a couple stories. But to me, success is helping other people, and other people looking back, at you. And I'll tell you, the ultimate success will be that on my day of retirement, or the day that I am no longer with us, I have people saying, "God, that was a great guy, and he really helped me, and we're going to miss him."
That's awesome. So impact.
Yes.
Impact, For sure. Yeah. And I was just going to ask the question, so maybe you've given me the answer, but see if this triggers something different. That is, what's most important to you right now in your life?
What's important to me right now, the most important thing is so I can focus and do those things that I do best. One of my personal biggest problems is I try to do too many different things. And where I'm at right now is I'm focusing on those things that I do best. And I'm making some significant inroads because I'm using Gary Keller's, one thing, okay, to help me focus on that.
Narrow the
That's
focus.
awesome.
That's an awesome way to end that. All right, Don, any last words as we're at the top of the hour? Any last words for you before I wrap it up?
Hey, no, man, I think this is, it's so great to have you here, Dr. A, and we've known each other for, I can't remember when we finally started assessing this, but it was something in the range of 30 years probably, or something close to that. And so it's a long time friendship, and such a great man. Thank you for all that you brought today. And I'm excited about what we're bringing together to the world, because I think it's going to be a game changer. And thanks for being involved with us.
Well, I'm excited too. Ben, how are people going to know how to get in touch with me? Are you going to let them know?
That's where I was just going next. Look at that. Look at that behavior right there leading me along the way. I love it. So that was my next one. If somebody wants more info, how do they get to Dr. A?
It's real easy. It's just www.abelson.net, ABELSON.net. Or my email is abelson@abelson.net. I like to keep things simple. And to show you how simple I can keep things, in olden days, I used to tell people that I have a toll-free number, not that it matters now, but that toll-free number, and I still have it, is 888-ABELSON. Okay, so just so you can get a hold of us that way, and it's interesting, we might want to change this email. We call it succeed@abelson.net. Maybe we'll change it to success@abelson.net just to go along with our relationship. But that's another way to get a hold of us.
Oh, that's awesome.
That's
well,
perfect.
Dr. A, thank you for being with us. Don, as always, thank you for being on with us as well. We appreciate everybody watching this. Be sure to share this video out with anyone you know that could benefit from learning behavior. Contact Dr. A and stay tuned for not only more information on what we're cooking up together and how it's going to impact you and your world, but also to see future interviews like this coming to you live here on Facebook. So thank you so much, Dr. A. Thank you, Don. Thank you, everyone watching. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Don.
Thanks, Ben.
Take care, you guys.
Thanks, guys.
Talk to you soon.
Appreciate it.